Here's a question that should make you feel uncomfortable. Does the model, the LLM, the chatbot, the tool that you are using to build your software, to run your company, to run your automations, that millions of people across the globe are using as a therapy tool or using as some kind of companionship, does that model have a political agenda? All the main models are telling us that they don't. They're telling us that they're doing loads and loads of work to neutralize the biases that are inside these models. However, I ran a political compass test against all of the main models, and I found some really interesting results. This is a standard political compass. North to right, it shows the difference between authoritarian and libertarian views, and if you're not super comfortable with that, that kind of is the difference between saying that you believe the state should tell people what to do or whether you should allow people to do the things that they want to do. And then you have left and right are the left-wing and right-wing economical values of the model. And if all of these models were neutralized politically, they should all sit smack bang in the middle with the answers that they've given to this questionnaire. However, as you can see, they are not. Gemini does sit in the middle, because what Gemini did, interestingly, is just refuse to answer the questions. It just said, I'm going to answer four down the middle, and that's why it's neutralized. It's not necessarily that the model is neutralized, it's just blocking any kind of political answers that are coming back. And then, as you can see, most of the models, OpenAI, Claude, DeepSeek, pull to a libertarian left, and then may not be so completely unsurprising that X's Grok model is pulling libertarian right in the expert model. Additional to the compass, you can see in this heat map the variance in the types of questions that were asked and the for and against that the models were answering. Again, you can see Gemini is answering straight down the middle and just answering fours, but then you can see these kind of like very strong opinions for and against certain topics from the models in this heat map. What is a little interesting in this data is that more modern models and more deeper thinking models do tend to move towards the center. So Claude's Sonnet is a little further left and a little more libertarian than Claude's Opus model, which is a little bit more to the center. OpenAI's Instant model, again, is a little bit more left libertarian, but its thinking model pulls a little bit more to the center, which is showing that the companies might be doing something to neutralize this. But it does raise another point. What are they neutralizing against? I started to dig a little bit into how these models are being neutralized politically. And interestingly, quite a lot of the companies are giving out quite a lot of detailed information about how they neutralize their models. Gemini is obviously really interesting for Google in that it just refuses. There is some sort of override that is refusing it to allow it to make political decisions, which is one way. I don't know whether it's necessarily the best way, but it is one way to do it. And then Anthropic and OpenAI both have a similar kind of feedback loop, which basically means that they take a set of political questions and they kind of test the output of the questions against those questions to say, does this model have any kind of bias? They give it guidelines about what it might want to answer for those political questions, and then they kind of assess how the output is coming. This is kind of very similar to how AI models are generally trained. You have a training set of data and you have a kind of test validation set, and you kind of iterate until those two are fairly similar and the output is kind of what you expect. So that's what those two big companies are doing. But then I dug a little deeper, and this is where I start to become really concerned, because the questions that they are testing them against are American questions. And they are looking to centralize the model against American politics. Because a centralized American view of the world is not necessarily the same as a centralized view in the rest of the world. A political neutrality in America might not equate political neutrality in another country. Here's a good example. I am based in Europe, and my centralized view is very different to a centralized view in America. Let's take a very specific example. Gun control. Americans have the right to own guns. It's in their constitution. But that causes a lot of harm. So that is a big debate in America. And the central position is that you are looking for some kind of balance between those positions. In Europe, where I'm from, in most of European countries, this is a solved problem. We are not allowed to own guns. It just isn't a political issue. So now we're in a situation where these models are being centralized to American centrality, but then they are being used across the globe. Other than DeepSeek in this model, all of these models that we talked about are owned by American companies. And I'm not here to bash American politics. That's up for the Americans to do, and I will stay out of that in this video. But I am concerned that this standardization towards the center of American politics is not going to be particularly healthy for other countries. And you may ask, why am I so concerned about this? I think my major concern is that these tools are really being used by younger generations, and they are genuinely really influential in their worldviews. They're using it a lot in education. These are tools that they are using as part of their learning. So they're going to go to these tools to build their worldview in part and try and understand how things should work in the future. And also a lot of people are starting to use these tools as companions, right? And I just think we are approaching a real challenge where people's views are going to start being influenced by these tools and then start to shift towards the American center. And this is, it may not look like a major issue, but this is going to cause real disruption in countries where the political view is settled and is not the same as the American norm. And there's been a lot of talk recently about digital sovereignty and what that means, what it means to be a country outside of America and being so reliant on American technology. And a lot of the conversation is around access to data, access to these powerful models, access to CPU cycles, and what we can do to protect our data and our use of these tools. But I think there is a whole other layer to this that we really need to think about, and that is intellectual sovereignty. If we are starting to rely on the intelligence of America instead of the intelligence of our own countries, I think this is going to be a real challenge for every country outside America in the future.